Out of the Blue. Epi 2, The Listening Lighthouse. This is a story about Frances, a white dove who discovers that guidance does not always arrive as a voice telling her exactly what to do. As she learns to wait without fear, the guidance that once seemed outside her becomes a quiet knowing within. Frances had begun to enjoy not knowing what came next. Mostly. One misty morning, she flew toward the coast, where a tall blue and white lighthouse stood above the sea. She had barely reached the cliffs when a quiet thought came. Wait, Frances circled once. Wait for what? Nothing answered. She landed on the lighthouse railing. A fishing boat rocked in the harbor below. Gulls called over the water. The lighthouse keeper polished the great glass lens. Frances waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. This would be easier, she muttered, if guidance included an explanation. The keeper looked at her. Waiting for something? Frances gave him a look that seemed to say, apparently. He chuckled. I know that feeling. A fog bank rolled across the water. Frances immediately prepared to fly. Wait. The knowing came again. This time she stayed. Moments later, the fog swallowed the cliffs. Frances could no longer see the harbor, the shoreline, or even the end of the lighthouse railing. Oh, had she flown when she first wanted to, she would now be somewhere inside that fog. The keeper switched on the lighthouse beam. A brilliant ribbon of light swept across the gray. Frances watched it turn. Light, darkness, light, darkness. Never arguing with the fog, never complaining that the fog should move, simply shining. Then Frances heard a distant bell from the harbor. 3 slow rings. The keeper listened. Boat returning. How can you know? Frances wondered. He smiled. You learn the language. Later, the fog began to lift. Frances waited for another voice. Nothing came. No word. No instruction. Instead, she felt a gentle warmth when she looked south along the coastline. She looked north. Nothing. South. Warmth. Frances tilted her head. So now we're doing feelings? The keeper laughed, though she had not spoken aloud. Frances flew south. A mile along the coast, she found a young girl standing beside a broken bicycle. The girl looked up. A white dove! Frances landed on the handlebars. A moment later, a delivery driver came around the bend, noticed the girl, and stopped to help. Frances blinked. No voice had told her, fly south and find the bicycle. Guidance had changed its language. The next day, it happened differently. Frances was resting beneath an open window while 2 women prayed quietly inside. One said, I don't know what to do. The other answered, maybe you don't have to know yet. The words went straight through Frances. Wait. She smiled. There you are. Weeks passed. Sometimes guidance came as words, sometimes as a feeling, sometimes through another person, sometimes through silence. And sometimes Frances noticed that what she called guidance was simply the absence of the urge to interfere. One afternoon, she returned to the lighthouse irritated. A flock of gulls had ignored her warning about a storm. They never listen, Frances complained. The keeper poured himself tea. And they always do this. And somebody needs to tell them. The keeper smiled. Frances stopped. She had believed she was being authentic. After all, she really was annoyed. But something felt hollow. She had confused honesty with rehearsing grievance. The keeper pointed toward the lighthouse lens. Imagine if the light spent all night describing the darkness. Frances looked at the enormous lamp. That would be a very talkative lighthouse. And not much help to sailors. Frances laughed. She closed her eyes. Underneath the complaint was something simpler. She wanted everyone safe. Underneath that was love. The grievance had only been a noisy wrapper. She let it fall. From then on, Frances became less interested in announcing every dark thought passing through her mind. She could notice one without building it a nest. She could acknowledge irritation without making someone guilty. She could be truthful without making complaint her identity. Love did not require her to pretend. It simply showed her what was worth keeping. One evening, Frances sat atop the lighthouse as the sun disappeared into the sea. She remembered when guidance had seemed like a mysterious voice somewhere beyond her. Do this, wait there, go now. But the more she listened, the less separate it seemed. The lighthouse beam swept across the water. Frances closed her eyes. There was no command, no explanation, no demand that she become worthy. Only presence. She realized she was no longer asking guidance to prove itself before she followed. She did not need to know why the next step was next. She did not need to manufacture certainty. The peace itself was enough. A breeze rose from the south. Frances opened her wings. The keeper looked up. "Where are you going?" Frances paused. She didn't know. And she didn't need to. She leaned into the breeze. Behind her, the lighthouse continued turning. Not forcing anyone toward shore, not arguing with the darkness, simply offering light to whoever was willing to see it. Frances disappeared into the evening blue, and the guidance went with her because she was beginning to discover it had never really been somewhere else. May we sing, rest, and dance our way home together.